And we're back to Manet. You knew he had to come up again. After all, I mentioned in the past with Olympia that he will turn up in Impressionism, and here he is. Now, his career really bridges realism into Impressionism, and the two movements work together really well. After all, when you capture that fleeting moment of real life, that's really a realist idea. And the realist idea of only capturing that which can be observed, well, that really speaks to the plein air painting style of many of the Impressionists. So Manet comes back here with his very famous painting, Bar at the Folies Bergere. And this is a popular cafe with musical performances. This is the sort of place that many Parisians would go in the evening. Remember, they don't really hang out at home. Netflix isn't a thing yet. Even reading isn't really seen as an appropriate thing to do every night. Instead, they frequently will go out on the town. And when they do, they may go to some of these cafes where they will have musical performances. If you saw the movie Moulin Rouge, that's kind of the same thing. There's music, there's dining. You're supposed to spend time there, drink heavily, and run up a large tab. But here we see a barmaid looking out with disinterest, or possibly lost in deep thought. The brushwork is rushed and blurred. Modeling and perspective are rather minimal. So when we get this detail, you get a sense of how Manet is working very quickly. Any of these bottles are just a couple of brush strokes. And what looks particularly simple is actually very complex. It means that he has studied these forms at some point, and he can read those colors, read those shapes, and abbreviate them in a way that we understand when we look at the painting as a finely painted clear glass with water and a stem. And he can do it in a few brushstrokes, whereas most artists, well, of course, are going to need to add more detail to it to get across the same read, the same idea. But this piece is different because of the mirror. As the barmaid looks out to us, the background is particularly tricky. Because, of course, what you run into is this problem where the things in the foreground don't match the things in the background entirely. So how does that work? Well, here's a chart looking from above at what we might be looking at. So we are positioned as if, well, maybe we're this man, kind of an odd position, an odd idea. And from our viewpoint, looking this way, we're going to see slightly different things. So for example, whereas we see all of this, we might only see a bare minimum of it through her arm or off to the side. And of course, the things here are hidden by her form. So it's very possible that this is a mirror. And we're actually seeing the back of the barmaid, but another Manet trick of convincing us that we look like this guy. And if I had his mustache, I would happily look like that guy. But it's also possible that this is a window. And that kind of makes things difficult. Because if it's a window, then we have a certain element of spatial detachment. Now, it wouldn't be unusual to have a bar with a half wall in between and then another bar on the other side, one inside the venue, one outside the venue. And of course, you could imagine two women in the same uniform looking, well, very, very similar. But what he's doing is he's playing with us once again, and Manet's famous for that. This is spatial detachment. The bar and the maid are detached from our understanding of physical reality. It's quite possible that Manet is playing with it and giving us sort of a hybrid between the possibility of a mirror and the possibility of a window. This visual contradiction calls attention to the pictorial structure of the painting, i.e., the painting is two-dimensional. It's flat. But most artists are trying to create the illusion of three-dimensional space. Manet is using the three-dimensional space, or at least the illusion thereof, to remind us that it's actually two-dimensional space. Confused yet? Well, what he's doing is just drawing your attention to exactly what the painting is. A two-dimensional representation of the three-dimensional world. And he's kind of doing it the same way in movies. You have characters who will talk directly to the audience, breaking the fourth wall. That's effectively what Manet is doing. Very interesting piece, and Manet will continue through Impressionism as one of the sort of elder statesmen of Impressionism throughout the movement.